Bow hunting all comes down to a moment. And in the moment, you want equipment on your bow that will get the job done. Trophy Ridge products are the tools bow hunters trust. React technology sights, rests, stabilizers, and quivers to help a bow hunter be successful in the field. And those tools are from Trophy Ridge. Join us at a Friends of NRA event where freedom, fun, and firearms come together like nowhere else. With more than 600 events held across the country, there's always one happening near you. From exciting games to exclusive auctions featuring one-of-a-kind firearms and gear you won't find anywhere else. Whether you're a lifelong hunter, a competitive shooter, or simply passionate about defending freedom, there is a seat for you. Visit friendsofnra.org to find an event near you and get ready for a night you won't forget.
Hey guys, this is Melissa Bachman. Are you ready to stop spooking deer before it's even time to hunt them? Then you need the new Flex S Dark cellular trail camera from SpyPoint. With a no-glow flash option, long-lasting solar power, and a ton of settings that can be changed anytime through the SpyPoint app, there are no more excuses for letting your deer get wise before the season even starts. So check it out for yourself and see why the SpyPoint Flex S Dark is the unstoppable and undetectable scouting tool you need for your next hunt.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bow Hunter Chronicles Podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. Huntworth gear for all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets. It's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And right now they have a 20% off season starter sale. Use code HNT20SPT to save 20%. It does exclude their clearance, but they've got some great new stuff in their clearance that they've added. And a couple of things like the Holton jacket, great mid-season jacket, pants, both of those are on sale. But that jacket, I really do like that. And then I was pretty interested to see they have the Torrington set, and it's like super cheap for what it is. That's the first stuff that I got from Huntworth. And it's soft shell. It's got a fleece lining, super warm in and of itself, quiet, just great stuff. So if you're looking for some of that like mid to later season stuff that isn't too bulky, that's super warm, definitely go give that a look. And then for our Patreon hunt coming up, Huntworth sent us a ton of stuff. So, pretty awesome of them to support us in that way. Just sent us a ton of stuff. So gonna have a bunch of that at the Patreon hunt. And then over at Latitude, they've got the new they got some new Molly pouches, and they got their back straps with the new Ranger green color, and they're a lot thinner than the previous ones. So if you are renting a tree stand and you're looking for a suspension system for that, check that out over at Latitude. And if you're on their email list, I just got an email today. That's the trailer for this year's Grit. And man, am I excited about that. It's got to be the best series out on YouTube. Really awesome. You definitely have to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But over there on the website, you can use code BHC to save 15%. Get over to Big Shot, check them out. They're sending us for the Patreon hunt one of their double duty doe targets for the largest doe harvested. So that's pretty awesome. That'll be at camp, and code BCP 10% off there. Guys at Canadian Zinger, I haven't hit them up yet, but they usually give us some arrows and stuff like that. great stuff. I've been shooting my bow, getting ready for this bear hunt, and can't wait to send one of those through a bear. So pretty, oh man, this bear hunt's going to kill me, but hopefully it's going to be a great experience, and I'm going to love it, but we will see. This week we are talking to Aaron Hepler from the In Camp podcast. He just started that up this year, but Aaron's been around. I first met him. He was with the Exodus guys at the PA show, introduced me to by Greg Litzinger, and everybody that Greg's like, hey, you need to talk to this guy. Has been great dudes, and Aaron is no exception. So fun conversation, talk some stuff about mentoring, kind of like what he's doing over there at the In Camp podcast, and then kind of get in depth on his expertise on clear cuts. He's written a bunch of articles on clear cuts, so just a wealth of knowledge on that. So going to be a fun one. Going to be, by the time you're hearing this, I'm going to be up in the UP, hopefully sending an arrow through a bear. But anyways, I know you guys are going to enjoy this. Aaron's a great dude. And as always, thanks for listening. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bow Hunter Chronicles Podcast. And today we've got Aaron Hepler, In Camp Podcast. You guys may have read his stuff on Meat Eater. He's been on a bunch of podcasts, and he just decided to jump headfirst into the podcast game, and we're going to try and figure out why he did that. So how you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. How about you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. So In Camp Podcast, like, what is that? Like, what's the basis behind all of it?
So the whole foundation behind my idea for the podcast, it's not like an original idea or anything, man, but I love being well-rounded outside. You know, you go through a phase. Oh, hang on one second. Good night. I love you. Sorry. I went through a phase where all I wanted to do was hunt bucks on public land and hunt a bed and kill a big buck. And that was kind of like, I don't want to say a teenage phase, because I was probably like, 22, 21, 22, 23, that age. But you go back to what really got you into the outdoors, where it was like you had a love to catch a bluegill under a bobber and hunt rabbits and pheasants, and the camaraderie aspect of it, and like just everything you can do in the outdoors. And I've started to really get back. I've got a lot of good friends. I got a lot of good friends locally. I got a lot of good friends in the space, and just remembering that there's a lot of other stuff to do than just hunt deer that's just as fun. And although deer hunting is by far my favorite, I love it all, man. Like, I've tried so much new stuff in the last couple of years, hunting predators at night, and bow fishing for stingrays, and fishing in a bay for stripers. And, I've done the Canadian trips for bass, and to New York for pike, and all that kind of stuff. And man, there's so much fun you can have. I'm going to do a little bear hunt in New Jersey, and there's just so much more that you can do than stick to the whatever's trending as far as hunting goes, And I wanted to bring that to the table, where it's not just a podcast where we talk about deer strategy. There's a lot of stories involved, to make sure that we're highlighting what other people have done, or the things that we really do to keep it memorable for us. So that's really why I started it. I wanted to make sure that the stories didn't get lost, and just really have a good time doing everything you can. So I'm gonna, it might not be popular, but there might be a fall pike fishing episode or whatever. I did start like some whitetail short episodes, so the whitetails don't get missed. Everybody wants, a little tidbit on what's working and what's happening in the woods at the time. So there'll be some of that, like kind of a report style kind of thing, or maybe it'll be highlighting a story from hopefully stories from my buddies that get to tag out and stuff like that. So we're going to highlight some of that, but just to make sure that it's staying well-rounded. I got a guy coming on to talk bird dogs this week and upland game. So I'm excited to talk about that a little bit because that's something I really love too. So just mostly just the well-rounded part of it.
So with that, and one of the things that I'm finding myself, I guess, being more and more torn by because of my situation, we had our daughter after we'd been married for 11 years. So we'd done a lot of stuff and had an incredible amount of freedom to go do, whatever we wanted. Like time was not of the essence. And now I'm getting into where we've got dance and we've got choir and we've got softball and we've got all these other things. So how are you able, because we just saw one of the littles come in and, so you've got that going on too. How do you stay well-rounded and manage all of those things and all that time? Because I think that that's one of the things that guys, kind of struggle with. And I mean, I guess like the whole adulting thing, we kind of have to push some things aside.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever I get to the fall, and this has been, I've been married for 12 years. Whenever I get to the fall, my wife doesn't care how much I go hunting. As long as the time that I get to spend with her is like, you need to be present. And I'm like, well, I'm here, we're doing, but that doesn't really count. Like, and it's not even only listening to everything she has to talk about. Like she wants a two-way conversation where we're hanging out and enjoy each other's company, because at any other time of the year, I enjoy her company. So why not now, and I do. It's just, we kind of get tunnel vision or, a one track mind and kind of stick to think, I mean, she could spit out my tree stand sights in which direction the thermal should be going on the next day, because that's what I'm talking about. And she's like, hey, just remember, like, our relationship is important too, and for my daughter, it's like, she's not really into sports. She actually just started playing volleyball. This is the first year she can play volleyball. So she's doing that kind of thing. And man, it's kind of exciting. I didn't play sports growing up. I was a musician, and I was pretty involved at my youth group and stuff, playing in bands and whatever. So it's kind of new to me, but man, I've been to like 3 of her volleyball games so far, and I freaking love like, it's so much fun to like watch her little team play. And she's only been playing for a couple of weeks, and how much better she's gotten already. And she wants to play in the backyard. And I'm like, absolutely. If this gets you off that freaking Roblox thing, let's do it. Like, so it's a lot of fun. And, just remembering that stuff's important to my family too. And ultimately my family is very important to me. They're more important than hunting and fishing. And they know that hunting and fishing is important to me. And they do everything they can to make sure that I get to go do that stuff. So that part of the balance, kind of, sometimes it just takes time to grow into it. And then you do need some reminders, and, maybe telling your spouse, hey, just give me a gentle reminder, 'cause I am uber not focused. I get it. I am, volleyball only goes till October 9th. So it's not like it's not a big insult to it's kind of cool. I'm only missing like one of her games for work and that kind of thing that I couldn't get a switch for. So it works out pretty well. So.
Yeah. So in that, like, what was your upbringing? Because you're in PA, right?
Yes,
so
sir.
What was your upbringing in the hunting and fishing space to get you where you're at now?
I've never not been outside. We grew up in a pretty rural neighborhood. So whether I was out down catching frogs and building a dam in a creek, and, I have pictures from me, probably 3-4 years old, catching bluegills with my dad, and ice fishing and squirrel hunting. And he took us out squirrel hunting all the time when we were growing up. I don't remember I might have deer hunted with him once when I was maybe 8. We went out and deer hunted for a little bit, but he never really took me deer hunting. We talked about it all the time, and I'd see his deer when he'd bring one home or whatever. But I never really got we didn't really spend a lot of time in the deer woods until I could archery hunt at 12 years old. But most of it was like the gateway was fishing and taking me squirrel hunting and just talking about it all the time and making me bows and arrows with a little maple switch and, fishing with a piece of twine or whatever it was that, we did that way, showing me deer tracks and poop and all that stuff. Like, I was talking about it with somebody today. And when you grow up hunting, I was talking about it with somebody who's like, yeah, I think I might be interested in talking about hunting. Like, on your podcast, you talk about like how to get started. And that's something I am focusing on, because I think I like talking about being a mentor, and I like talking about getting mentored, because we were talking about this for my podcast the other day. I think the important thing is if I can pass it on to one person, and that person can pass it on to one person, that person passes it on to two people, it's just the domino effect, So I like to talk about getting people started in the outdoors. So there is some of that and I think people that are advanced can get something from that too, because they're learning about, hey, maybe I never thought about teaching a new person that way. So to get back to your main question, I think that part of it is important. What was your main question? I'm trying to think of the whole base of that one.
Yeah, just how you grew up and like what the...
Right. So me learning that stuff, I think you learn it by osmosis, right? My dad taught me about deer tracks and poop and a scrape and a rub when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. And he's like, oh, can you find the other... we learned about, I was homeschooled. My mom would teach us, we'd like go down there and put plaster of Paris and raccoon tracks and squirrel tracks and learned everything that way. Right. We went to there's I don't know if he's famous, but he's an artist, Ned Smith. He did some stuff in PA, and we'd go to shows like that, local sportsman shows and, all that kind of stuff, all these events. And you just learn all this stuff about the woods at such a young age that when you get to, 12 years old, you're doing your hunter safety course. You're like, I already know that. I already shoot, I'm shooting shotguns at, 8 to 12 years old, shooting clay birds. And I've been shooting a bow since I think I had my first bow at 5 years old. You know what I mean? Like a little fiberglass compound bow. And I shot every night with my dad in the backyard, and he took us pheasant hunting with the dogs and all that kind of stuff. So you learn a lot of that even before you get there. Well, I'm talking to this new guy today, one of the physicians at the hospital, and he's like, well, I'd really like to get into it, but does your podcast talk about, kind of how to kind of stuff? And I'm like, we don't focus so much on how to, but yeah, you'll learn a lot of general information on what resources you could use and things like that. From time to time. And I said, it's not easy to get into hunting as an adult, because I've helped a couple people recently, and there's so much that you don't think about. One of my buddies that's been hunting for a couple of years now, we recorded for one of the whitetail episodes the other day, and I think about how far he's come in 4 years, right? When I took him out for his very first, let's go out, I'm going to teach you about deer. Right? We're not talking about bows, nothing. We're going to go learn about deer. And I took him to one of my best spots because I knew I could really show him a lot there. And we're kind of going over stuff, and I'm like, well, there's a really nice scrape right there. You see that scrape? And then we're talking about the rub, and so later on that day, walks up to a rub. He's like, man, look at this scrape. And I'm like, no, that's a rub. And he's like, what's the difference? Well, I guess when you think about the word, they're both the same thing. It could be a scrape. I don't know, but those are the things you don't even realize. And then he's asking me well, so I just need an orange hat. I'm like, no, you need 200, you need a vest, a hat, talking about simple regulations that those things kind of matter. Especially if you don't want to be getting in trouble and stuff like that, and then when you're scouting, but you learn all this stuff as a kid. Because if my dad went squirrel hunting, he'd be like, well, now we have to wear orange, and you can use only, you can't use a center fire rifle for hunting squirrels, or, this is what you want to hunt this with or whatever. Like, those are questions I didn't have to ask when I got to 12 years old. Now people are trying to do it in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And they're like, what kind of scope do I need? And you're like, whoa, back up, So that's one thing that I really want to kind of drive home with In Camp Podcast too, is kind of bringing these people up. And like I said, if I'm having that conversation, I think that somebody advanced can either learn about being a mentor from those episodes, or even so, like, sometimes new people have some pretty good ideas, man. Because this kid that I got started a couple of years ago, year 2, he missed a 125-inch 9-pointer at 10 yards. Well, how did he get that? How did he get that close? Like, he had that deer on camera a whole bunch of times before he had an opportunity at it. So it's like, he learned something pretty quick, He went elk hunting his second year in Colorado. Now, he had some friends out there that said, this is kind of the area you want to go to. But he got within 50 yards of 3 different bulls and unfortunately only had a cow tag on his second year bow hunting. Like, that's unheard of. So these are things like, I really hope that people can kind of accelerate the learning curve, cut some of the simple stuff out by learning it quicker. Not like I want them to earn it or whatever, but there's stuff that, like, if you just learn a fast track way of learning some of the simple things, you keep yourself out of trouble, or you learn something good that can help you along the way.
So from that, like, mentorship side of it, in your family growing up, I mean, obviously you were hunting all these things, you were doing all these things. What for your family, because my family was way different than, like, I guess where the hunting space is now, or in the circles that I run in, what was the emphasis, like, that your dad, your family, your hunting group put on deer, like being from PA, like back before there was antler point restrictions and now there's antler point restrictions, like when you were 12 years old up until, you were able to be an adult and go hunt on your own and try and get that buck from a bed, etc. Like, what was the emphasis growing up?
So I think that was probably something initially that really sparked me to go after a big buck, because quite honestly, like, we didn't, other than small game, we didn't hunt public land. Okay. And I'm still really good family friends. I hunt a nice farm. I can hunt pieces and parts of it. And I grew up hunting that farm, but we also, for bow hunting, we had like maybe 5 or 6 different, 5 to 20 acre pieces that we hunted religiously. Okay. And my dad, it was really my dad and my uncle. They were the archery hunters, and, the diehard Loggy Bayou fans. And, we did all of that kind of stuff. And I want to tell you something here. My uncle, at that age, I think my uncle had killed 2 bucks. One was a 3-pointer and one was a half rack 3-pointer. And my dad still has only killed 1 buck. It was a half rack spike. Okay. So that can go to really tell you that they could give 2 craps about shooting a buck. Do they want to? Yes. They love to see bucks. They love to talk about bucks. They love to see rubs. They love to see all the sign. Do they care about actually killing one? Not a bit. They love to spend time just in the woods. They love to just hunt. My dad doesn't really bow hunt anymore, but my uncle still does quite a bit, and he's in his late 60s, mid to late 60s. So he still bow hunts. He uses a crossbow because he doesn't have a rotator cuff on one side anymore, but they still love it. So when I was 12, your question about what was the emphasis on, really deer hunting, they're really, like I said, it was very well rounded. They were like, let's go today's opening day of small game. We're going rabbit and pheasant hunting today. We got a guy with a dog. Let's go shoot some small game. Okay, today's opening day bow hunting. We're going bow hunting. Whatever it happened to be, they wanted to do that. My uncle is more of a deer hunting guy, so he was always, just deer hunt, But it was really just about finding whatever easy food there was to find. I don't remember ever worrying about the wind when we were a kid. They were like, well, just go sit. The deer are used to the smell. Okay, sounds good. And most of the time they were kind of right about that, because I remember watching leaves blow right into a deer's face from where I was sitting, and they didn't care. But we hunted like a lot of white oak stands, and the focus was just find a deer and kill a deer. But yeah, pretty much if the fall started, the emphasis on just hunting was huge. It's like, that's all we do. We're just going to hunt. We're just going to hunt. And then, you get some ice, and then it'd be time to ice fish and things like that. But
Optimism isn't sunshine and rainbows. It's fixing things, changing the way we fix things. It's running the world on smarter energy. Because if optimism never stops, then change can't either. GE Vernova, the energy of change.
This episode is brought to you by KPMG. Making an impact is how KPMG helps make the difference. KPMG applies advanced tools and strategic thinking to convert data into actionable knowledge and deliver value by improving performance through transformation, modernizing processes with technology, harnessing the power of data, navigating complex M&A transactions, and enhancing trust among stakeholders. Go to kpmg.us/advisory to learn more. KPMG. Make the difference.
I mean, we hunted from whenever the season opened in October until whenever it closed in January. And it was a lot. So
now as you transition into a mentor and you're trying to talk to these guys, how do you instill that upon them? Because the climate has changed, right? Like we talked the other day, and it was like, you could watch monster bucks or you could look at Bowhunter magazine, but we weren't inundated with, it didn't look like everybody was killing 140s, 150s all the time everywhere. Yeah. And that wasn't the focus. There wasn't guys out there just talking about it. I mean, there was books out there, and you could go to a show and go to a seminar or something. But both growing up, not having an emphasis on big bucks. And I just kind of find it funny when you're saying like the deer don't care about the smell. I've seen them. We've all seen that like spike or that like button buck that comes up and licks your steps or whatever. Yep. Like they don't care about the wind. And that's why they weren't killing bigger bucks or whatever. But
oh yeah.
So, but how do you like instill that? My father-in-law, he says, you just got to get a few under your belt, and then you can kind of decide what kind of hunter you're going to be or what you're going to go after. In this world of, like you said, Roblox and TikTok and all these things that are like instant gratification, when you're talking to, and obviously if you're talking to a physician who's like used to doing things at like a super high level and generally like laser focused. I mean, my brother is a physician, so I understand like, what it takes, but B, like when you get to that point, it's not, we don't do things really half-assed, it's going to be all in. How do you start that conversation of saying like, sometimes it's just got to be good enough for a while?
The guy that I'm teaching has passed up a lot of does already, right? He's never killed a deer yet. And I think this is going to be his 5th year archery hunting. And he hasn't killed a deer yet. And I told him the other day, I'm like, you kind of just need to pull the trigger at some time, dude. Because he's like, oh man, I wish I had some deer meat. I'm like, listen, you got to just pull the trigger. Because you're not going to know how much you like killing something until you kill it. That part's important. As far as like loving hunting, the people that I've gotten into it end up loving it from probably a dopamine type of experience where they like, had a really good hunt when we were together. I remember one guy I got started. We went on a duck hunt, and I don't know how many wood ducks. I actually talked about this today too. I don't know how many wood ducks we saw, but it was a lot. And back then the limit for wood ducks was 3. And there was 3 of us, and we shot 7 wood ducks. So we shot 8 wood ducks. So we were one short of a 3-man limit of wood ducks. And he was like, I mean, I don't know how many wood ducks he missed trying to shoot that last one. And he was like, this was the most fun I ever had, and I don't know that you need that type of experience every time to get somebody really hooked. Cause there's some people that kind of slide into it naturally. Like the other guy that I got started that I said, you just need to shoot a deer, man. Like just pull the trigger, cause you're not going to know what it's like until you do it. He just kind of just loves the experience. He's never really done like, he's starting to really like hard things. And, it's kind of proven that when you do hard things, your brain kind of grows in that area, and I think hunting is no exception, because it's not easy, especially when when there's all this information, because we were just talking about the wind. When my dad and my uncle would go sit, there literally was never a bad wind, not because just they didn't care. They'd be like, oh, well, sometimes the deer come from there, so it's a great wind. Like when you go and you learn all this stuff about like thermals, air currents, going up and down, and here's the bedding over here, so you want to sit over here, and you're learning about depth of cover, and you're learning about the habits of a mature buck versus the habits of a button buck, and there's just so much stuff that is available to learn. Like you go on one blog site, and there's like 1,800 things you need to know about to kill a deer, which is not 100% necessary. But I think it's part of, kind of keeping it light and fun in the beginning. Like take your mentees out in the woods scouting with you and show them why you get excited about it. Like I get excited about a thigh size rub. I don't know about you, but if you show them why and then tell them why, and then now we have these things called trail cameras. You can show them like this buck made that. And that's kind of cool too. Like, oh, well, you don't need cameras. You don't, but they're part of what we do now. They're part of modern day hunting, whether we like it or not. They're probably not I don't think every state is going to get rid of, especially regular SD card cameras. I know this cell cam, there's a debate on that stuff, but it's kind of part of our life in hunting now. And although there doesn't need to be a giant emphasis on that, I don't know if you can argue if you don't like seeing deer pictures. Like if you like to hunt a deer, you like to see a picture of a deer,
Man, I don't know. I have a different kind of like opinion on that. It's funny. My buddy, he's got like all these deer in Missouri. Like he's got a lease in Missouri, and he sends me all these pictures, and a lot of them are in the night and like whatever. And it's like, it's fun to be able to look at that and to be able to like look at the property and try and like break it down and say, okay, I think maybe they're bedding here, and what wind are they coming in on, like that sort of thing from that sort of standpoint. But at one point I told him, just stop sending me pictures like this. And I said, it's just like deer porn. It's like deer that I'll never be able to shoot. You're just sending me pictures of things to get me excited for what? Yeah. And it's just, for me, that is irrelevant. And I think that's why I guess I'm not that successful. Like I said, it would be better. But that's the thing for me, is like when people say that I did, everybody just likes seeing big deer. I think, yes, if you put that camera there, you found that spot. Yeah. And, it is, what I talk about all the time is validation, that you were able to figure it out. But other than that, like, unless you're using that intel, then I said, like, you're just like a trail cam, like, enthusiast. You're not, like, if you're not figuring those deer out, you're just collecting pictures.
So there's a few reasons why I like trail cameras, though. Well, I mean, let's talk about it, because it's like, it's something that's so debatable, like something that's coming up all the time. Like, oh, we got to get back to just fundamentals, and trail cameras should be used as a tool, period. They shouldn't be used as a crutch for your scouting. They shouldn't be used as a way to just go in and kill something. That's not what they're for. They can be used to pattern a deer as close to live time as possible. Like with SD card cameras, if you're going to check them, every 2 weeks, which is probably excessive or whatever. There's a few times that I like to use trail cameras. I love getting pictures of velvet bucks because I don't know, that's kind of neat. When you're hunting, you don't get to see bucks in their bachelor groups, and it's fun to see that. So the other thing they can tell you is something a little bit about deer density. Am I in an area where there's a lot of deer? Yes or no? I don't necessarily need to see a lot of bucks. I just want to know if this area is a place that deer prefer to use as food, whatever, travel, and times of year that a deer like to use it. So I am very rarely ever using a trail camera during the hunting season. I like to check them. I didn't even put any out early enough to check them before the season this year. So I have no idea. I mean, there's one set of cameras that my buddy checked, 2 cameras, and we have a couple bucks on it in velvet in August. Other than that, I have really no idea what's going on. We have some cell cams out. Mostly they're not really taking many pictures. A couple, does here and there. It's fine. But I like to get pictures of velvet bucks, kind of know the deer density. And then I'm not really checking a camera until if I pass that camera when I'm hunting, I'll pull an SD card and put a new card in it or something and check it when I get home. And then whatever data that I collect is really used to kind of get a gauge on what that area might be like next year. If the deer density sucks or there's nothing there, then I know, hey, this might be a place you should cross off the list. Go back in there and look. And if there's no sign, like it's just one place you can eliminate. Or I've had the places where, hey, every freaking November 1st, for whatever reason, they like this little terrain funnel. So this is a good place to sit at that time of year, especially if you have your predominant wind happening or whatever it happens to be. There's been a couple places where I found where it's like, oh, hey, this is actually a place where you can sit in an off wind, which isn't something you get to do very often. I don't really get to hunt very many southeast winds, and it's kind of hard to find a place to sit in a southeast wind because I'm not used to doing that. So if you have a camera that you've known for a couple years, like, hey, this is an area where I could sit and get away with the southeast wind, those are things that I've learned. I've actually never patterned a buck on a trail camera and said, oh, I can shoot him here because of this pattern he's on. Or, my first public land buck, I didn't even own a camera. And that was in 2018. So those are things that I like to use cameras for. I don't know if it's the right way to use them, but I don't want them to be top priority in my strategy at all. I actually didn't use cameras at all last year. I got some pictures from buddies that ran cameras or whatever, but it's something that if you want to be well-rounded in the woods and have woodsmanship skills, then you need to go out in the woods and build your woodsmanship skills, and then use your trail cameras to A, confirm them, or B, kind of clear up some of the muddy water that you don't know about.
Yeah, I forgot I was talking to one of these guys, these Exodus guys. But so one of the things you said there is that you don't think that it should be like a crutch to your scouting, but I think that, like, isn't that really kind of like what we're doing? We're looking, you go out, at least for me, the process goes like this. I look at a map or an area that I would think would be a good area. Mm-hmm. You walk in there, you find some sign, whether it's rubs or scrapes or big tracks or whatever, or just places that look like maybe not necessarily a spot that you want to hunt, but a spot where there's like lots of deer sign, like a big runway or something like that. So you can get inventory. But how is that not like a crutch to your scouting? Because you can't be there all the time and you're just trying to see like what is there.
That's a good point. Like I said, I think as far as trail cameras go, it's really a kind of a confirmation, but like, again, it's also time of year. Like, okay, I know this is a good area because there are rubs and scrapes and this kind of thing. But what time of year are they making those? Unless you have the opportunity. So if you're hunting, especially if you're hunting a big tract, if you aren't hunting a big tract of timber and you have the opportunity to use glass and go check it, I would use glass 100 times over a trail camera. You're going to learn a lot more live time. You're going to learn, how those deer use the property, where they're coming out at. You'll kind of learn their habits, body language, that kind of thing. You'll learn a lot more about deer that way. If you're hunting a big tract of timber, I have one of my main areas has a couple different scrape lines. And one scrape line, they start to make it's usually kind of like a white oak acorn pattern, which you can't really find white oak acorns here. They're just all over the place. But you can tell that that's kind of what they're making this scrape line along. Usually the scrapes are kind of small, and it's something that they make early. They already started to make some of them. So they're kind of going through this area, mid-September to early October. And then you have an area where they're kind of in between that. The acorns are dried up. So they're kind of going in between a different food source. Maybe it's browse, maybe it's clear cut or something like this. And then you have like these runway, what I would call runway, where they're getting closer to the end of the rut, where they're trying to cruise doe bedding areas. So I can assume that this is a doe bedding area, and I can assume this is the runway, and bucks are checking these scrapes as they're going along to check this doe bedding area. But this scrape line, this bedding area, maybe that's a feeding area at this time of year, so you're kind of confirming the time of year. And like I said, unless I'm passing a camera when I'm hunting, I don't check it. So I'm really building most of that data after the season. Kind of like if you check one on the way, you're like, oh, I hope that buck shows up or whatever, but it's not really usable data anymore. It already happened. So moving forward, deer do a lot of the same things. And sometimes if you get that same type of year where the food is the same or the cover is the same, you might have an opportunity to capitalize. Usually, some of the properties I hunt go in like a 2 or 3 year cycle where everything's pretty similar. So you might have that same time frame of year. I found a really big horizontal rub a couple years ago. Okay. And I'm like, well, I'm going to hang a camera on this rub. It's got scrapes, whatever. And I want to see when these deer are coming through this chute. Well, we had one of the deer that I was kind of chasing that year. We had this big 8-pointer on in velvet. And after the season was over, I pulled this card and he's on this camera on November 1st, right? And I think we ran it a second year and there was some good bucks on it November 1st. Well, why didn't I hunt it November 1st? Well, it was an area where I didn't really know a whole lot about. And I'm like, this is a pretty good area. I sat it once or twice, probably sat it too early. Well, I realized, maybe this is like, for whatever reason, this is like a November 1st, kind of place. So, what wasn't last year? It was 2 years ago. I went in there and I sat November 1st, and I was having a pretty good morning. My buddy had grunted in like 2 small bucks. He was sitting like 300 or 400 yards away. He grunted in 2 or 3 small bucks, and I had a little 7-pointer coming in, and I was gonna shoot him, and it was like right after gray light, right at legal light, and I grunted, and he started, getting all his hair stand up on his back, and he was coming in, and I was about to draw my bow, and this little spike buck comes in and just comes running into my grunt call. And he sees this other buck and turns to the, like, oh, shoot, and the buck that I was about to shoot goes and chases this deer. I'm like, oh, darn it. And I see a doe drop off a bedding area, and she came, pretty close and went through. And about an hour after that, I saw a rack coming down the same way the doe did. And I kind of immediately recognized it because I had pictures of this deer in velvet. But I didn't, other than the pictures I had in the summer, I hadn't checked any cameras to that point. And I was like, oh, okay. So he's hitting a scrape near one of the cameras that I had set. And I ended up, he started going the other direction, like going down the hill, and I grunted at him. And he kind of like looked over, and I snort wheezed, and he turned and came, oh, this deer's going to be my 20. So I drew my bow and I'm watching this deer. And of course I was looking at his rack because he was like, I don't know. I put him in the mid 140s, and hindsight, he was probably more like, I don't know, he might have been 150. I ended up seeing them in the next day, but I drew my bow, put it on at 20, and I shot, and I hit like his brisket, basically, like up under him. And I wasn't sure how high. I thought maybe I hit his liver or whatever. And I'm trying to nock another arrow, and he's looking around and he's pissed, right? Like, this deer's just like, what little buck just hit me like that? And when I knocked the arrow, he saw me and, kind of just trotted off. And I'm like, all right, well, I got to wait at least 2 hours to get out this stand so I don't goof him up, and then I'm going to just back out. So I ended up hiking out the, 3 or 4 miles it was to my truck, drove home, got all situated, and my buddy that was with me called me and was all pumped. And I'm like, what's up? He's like, I just killed one with my recurve, So he ended up killing a really nice 8-pointer, his first buck with his recurve. And I was like, all right, well, we'll come in. I'll help you pack it out. And then, by the time we get out, it'll be like 6 or 7 hours. We'll start looking for blood for the deer that I shot. So we did that, tracked the blood for a while, found a bed, brought a dog in. The dog got excited to the bed, and then he kind of like lost interest, and he wanted to go down this hill.
This is an ad.
I hate
An
ads!
ad for crisp, refreshing Angry Orchard hard cider.
That is refreshing.
An ad that interrupted your podcast.
I hate being interrupted!
To remind you to stop being angry at me and crack open an Angry Orchard.
That's a good idea.
Don't get angry. Get Orchard. Angry Orchard Cider Company, LLC. AngryOrchard.com. Please drink responsibly. Angry Orchard is a hard cider with other natural flavors.
A message from McAfee.
I'd say howdy, but I'm not a real cowboy.
And I'm not a real alien.
We're deep fakes, and because of fakes like us,
it's hard to tell what's real.
Unless you have McAfee. McAfee's scam detector automatically identifies text and email scams.
And even deep fakes.
And it works everywhere, even out on the range.
Yeehaw! But you're not even a real cowboy.
If they're faking it, they're not making it past us. Get award-winning scam detection today. McAfee.com/keepitreal.
And the guy was like, the deer's not down there. What do you mean? There's nothing down there. So I went back the next day with a friend and ended up jumping this deer in a big pile of boulders. He was laying in a big pile of boulders. And essentially the deer was fine. Like he bolted out of there like nothing was wrong. Went straight up the face of a mountain, like gone, Never found him after that. Point to the story is that area was something I learned, like, hey, it's kind of a little, I don't want to say it's a ditch because it's not really a ditch, but it's kind of, a low spot in the terrain, not a saddle either, but it's kind of just a low spot in the terrain where they like to go up and down between feeding. And there's a doe bedding area that's pretty close by, but those bucks don't really like that area unless it's that, October 30th to like November 3rd time frame. There's really not a lot of bucks in there. There's a pile of does, and that's obviously why the bucks are in there later on. But it's kind of what I like to use cameras for. Is I learned that all hindsight. I didn't really know that. I didn't know that at that time. Like, hey, this spot is a November 1st spot. When I found that horizontal rub with the scrapes, I kind of thought it would be a mid to late October spot, and it's not how it played out.
It's interesting, like listening to that and then thinking about kind of another reason why I feel the way that I feel about cameras. And I think you're kind of like touching on it, but it's like, I feel like, and especially with these cell cams, and I kind of want to get into that too, but I feel like we're, with the cell cams is like, no matter what, we're always chasing old information. It doesn't matter if you're 100 yards away, like, that deer's in the area, but it's not there anymore, and man, it's bit me so many times, like where I know where I'm supposed to be and then I'll get a picture. So then I'll go sit over there, and then I'll see nothing, and then I'll get a picture from where I was going to be, and, or I'll go back and check a camera. And it's just so frustrating. But really, about the cell cam thing, like, in today's day and age, like, other than like a financial burden, like, why would you put out an SD camera?
Well, the reception thing is a big deal, because hopefully you're hunting areas that don't always have reception. Kind of means you're getting away from the beaten path and you're really trying to have fun. That's one of the biggest reasons. There is another reason. So cell cams, to me, like I said, I like to use them. They are not, even if you take a live picture, if there's a deer in front of that camera, the opportunity for, for myself to go in that far and think the deer is still going to be there. I mean, dude, I've had deer on Ridge A at 9 o'clock in the morning and then a mile away at 11 o'clock in the morning. Like, that deer ain't going to be there most of the time. If I had a farm in the backyard and I had a cell cam out there, I might be able to go poke a shot with him at a rifle. I don't know. But then if I had that, I probably wouldn't have a cell cam out there. Because that's just, I wouldn't really feel good about that. If you do, that's your thing to deal with. As far as the SD card cameras, I like that they make me go out in the woods. Because I say this a lot. My grandfather used to tell me there's more room around them than there is on them. And he was really referring to trying to shoot them. But it's kind of true with the camera. I mean, in PA, we got a lot of public land and it's all big tracts of timber. And your camera is taking a 15-degree angle, 70-foot shot of the entire woods of thousands and thousands of acres. That's a very small part of woods. Now, I had a really good spot that I found this was maybe 8 years ago. I found a couple finger ridges that I really like to hunt. And when I say that, they're just like a bunch of little tiny ridges that came together. And I found a shed in there, and I'm like, I'm going to hang a camera in here. I'm going to kill a deer. And I found a really nice buck bed and whatever. The shed was in it. And I went there and I hunted with a buddy. And he saw, I don't know, like down in the other area I found, he saw like 10 bucks that morning. And I saw 4. And 2 of them were Pope and Young type bucks, like the 120, 125, 130 range. And it was full blown chasing. They were cruising on a doe, and I was up too high on the ridge. So the next, did I go in there the next day? I went in there like a week later, and I went down to where I saw all these deer, kind of using the cruising area. I actually didn't run a camera there this year. This was just the year that I had found the area. And I'm like, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to kill this buck that I found the shed from. And a button buck started chasing a doe around in circles all around me. This was like November 14th. And, it's like 9 or 9:30, and the woods is just dead. I didn't see, other than the button buck and the doe, I didn't see a squirrel. I didn't hear a chipmunk, nothing. And the tree that I was sitting in, the wind was blowing from the southwest, and the tree that I was sitting in was right over like a seep, like a runoff seep. And the cold water was pulling my wind straight down the hill. But if I threw, if you could like reach over far enough and throw some milkweed out, you'd see the milkweed go straight up the hill with the wind. But when I put it down right where I was, it was sucking right down this creek. I'm thinking, well, that's good. So I'm learning something, it's this area, this is how the wind goes. And, I'm just kind of like taking it in or whatever and thinking, I'll probably get down at 11. It's kind of dead or whatever. And, I had things to do that afternoon. And I was like, I heard a little crunch, and I like looked over the corner of my shoulder, and I'm like, holy crap, there's that buck I found his shed. It's like, picture perfect. This deer's coming in, he's feeding, and I'm like, man, he's freaking huge, And I was using I was in a tree stand at that time. I wasn't in a saddle yet. And I'm afraid of heights. So I was using the biggest tree stand I could possibly find. And I carried that thing with me, So I'm using 32-inch hawk sticks. I'm up 4 sticks. And I had a 34-inch Hawk Helium XL, big old platform. And it had gotten a little bit, like, from me sitting in it, the seat and the bottom of the stand had got a little condensation and froze. And when I stood up, man, that tree stand was, and that deer was like, he was uphill from me and he was essentially eye level. And I'm like, oh boy, this ain't good. And he did one of these and he's kind of like looking at me, and then he just goes back to feeding. And I'm like, oh man. And then I kind of got the idea he smelled that doe, because he started following just that direction that doe was chasing that button buck was chasing that doe. So I got turned around and I got to half draw. And as soon as I got to half draw, the tree stand, and I'm like, my heart just sank. And that deer put his head straight up and he looked at me and did the head bob a couple times, jumped to 75 yards and he just blew and blew and blew and blew. And I'm there like watching this buck that I had been thinking about all year. And this was the second time I got busted that year. I'm watching this buck just walk away, and he would have been, I killed my first 10-pointer the year before that. So he would have been my biggest buck for sure. And, just watch him walk out of my life, and never saw that deer again. But the thing about it is, I said there's more room around them than there is on them, right? So I'm like, well, next year I want to hang a camera in here because I want to learn, like, when do they start using this runway? Okay. I'm like, okay. And we'll kind of find out, what you learn something about the caliber or whatever. Doesn't really matter. So I hung a cell cam there. I did not get one single picture on that cell cam. Like, I had a couple of small velvet bucks, but nothing extra spectacular. Season started. Did not get a single picture all the way through October. Didn't get a single picture all the way through November. And then I think I ended up killing a buck somewhere else, and my buddies went in there and saw some nice bucks, right? I'm like, So the next year after that, I sent another guy in there. I'm like, you need to go to this spot. He was having a really hard time. He's like, I don't know. I'm just not seeing any bucks. He was like getting kind of down. So I'm like, listen, buddy, go in here, sit. You'll have a good time. You'll see something. So he goes in there and he saw 13 bucks and a bear. He sat the whole day because he just kept seeing buck after buck after buck. He saw what he would say were, I think he said 5 shooters, a couple in the 120s and one 7-point that was like maybe 130 inches. But like, the way he told me where these deer were, I would not have had one single one of those deer on that trail camera. There's more room around them than there is on them. I had that camera pointed at a trail where I thought they would be running all the time. They were literally going around the other side of that camera that year for whatever reason. I don't know what it was. But just because your camera doesn't show something, like, there were a couple runway trails in there. I still sent that guy in there because I said it was a good spot. I had almost killed a buck there. I had seen 4 really good bucks there the time before. You just got to go sit. So there's things that you learn about these areas, and the thing that's going to teach you the most of the time is observation. Like, you learn a lot from the sign, and hey, looks like probably a trail they use for a runway or a scrape line or whatever. You learn those things, but you have to confirm things with your eyes, and sometimes trail cameras help and sometimes they don't. Maybe I would have gotten pictures of that buck and said, this is the trail you need to be on, and killed that buck on that trail. So sometimes they do help for confirmation of like, hey, I got 2 trails in here, which one's the best? But if you're going to do that, you should hang 2 cameras, hang one here, hang one there. It's confirming your information, time of year, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, cameras can be a crutch, but then you kind of have to like take what you've learned from the woods, or you have to take what you learned from the woods and apply it, and then you have to kind of use gut feeling and your own deduction of why you think that area is going to be good. My buddy didn't kill any of those 13 bucks that day, but he sure had a good day hunting.
Yeah, but I think that goes back to like our previous conversation is, I think why, at least for myself, right? I'm better out of state because I'm just going and looking for the sign that I'm seeing and being able to read the woods. And then a lot of times that is observation. Well, you sit where you're finding sign, or like the deer have to be around here somewhere. You see a move, you adjust, and then you're on them,
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. Like I think about with cameras is that like you're just, whether you have the woodsmanship or not, and this is again why I say, hunting in my home state, like I'm just dog shit. Like I just do a terrible job because I either just go off of like go and sit somewhere, and I'm not just bombing around like I do out of state and finding that information. Then you have these 1 or 2 cameras or these 1 or 2 spots, and you just go in there without confirming stuff. And that is, kind of like what you're saying. It's like, you just have to, follow your gut, go check it out. And if it's not, it's not, it's not going to be that.
Yeah, for sure. I could use so many different examples of cameras. The other thing too, there's some times where I'll hang cameras in an area I know I'm not even going to hunt that year. I just want to learn something about it. And maybe I will get to hunt that. It's just like, hey, you have all this around you, and this is the area that you're going to focus on this year. And maybe you want to go burn a sit somewhere else because you don't want to, like, the wind's going to suck for this area, and you want to go try one of those other spots. I'm probably not even, like I said, I probably wouldn't even check a camera unless I passed it on one of those spots. But, maybe it's something you, like I said, density is a pretty important thing. Big wood scenario. You have a cut that's like 10 years old. Is it good or is it not? Well, sometimes, even in that little pole timbery kind of stuff where it's just, 3-inch sapling or, 6-inch saplings all over the place, they're not all bad. Sometimes bucks, that cut was made, and when it was made, something funneled bucks through that cut, probably. Okay, unless it was like a giant mess and they wanted to go around the whole thing. But they end up using that funnel for a long time, like well into past that cut's available food, browse and stuff like that. So there are some that I've hung in really old cuts to see, are there deer coming through this area? Is it, you'll go in and you'll be like, all right, well, there's deer crap all over in here. Some of it's old, some of it's newish. Are they just passing through? Are they living in here? Do they come through here every day? Or is it like once a week you get like a deer that's got the runs or something? What's happening in here? So those are things that I've learned from hanging cameras in an old place like that, where like, hey, this doesn't really look productive, but I see a lot of deer crap in here. What's happening with that? Is it because there's a large deer density in the area? And that's something I can learn about the area. I'm not running cameras out of state ever. Like, I'm kind of like you. I want to go find the fresh sign and have a really good experience just hunting. I don't want to be driving, 5, 6, 7, 10 hours to go to a spot that I like to hunt out of state. I'm just going to go have fun, hunt there. Most of the time, all my camera strategy is based for home. And I mean, that's kind of just my go-to when it comes to that.
Yeah. And, this brings it back to, like, I think one of our first conversations, I was like, man, I need to get you on to talk about cuts. So since you brought it up, like, what is your favorite or most productive, like, time after something's been cut? And what kind of timber?
So there's all different. Okay, so there's a lot of different kinds of cuts. A lot of what they're doing now is, the state has cut so much stuff. A lot of what they're doing now is going around and laying down the 6 to 8 inch pole timber and just leaving it lay. They're not cleaning it up or anything. Maybe that's for grouse habitat. And they're literally doing this all over the state. I was up in the northwest part of PA this spring a lot. They're doing the same thing in that corner of the state as they're doing in the northeast corner of the state, everywhere. They're doing a lot of that. What I am finding is that deer are really using the edges of that for probably about 5 to 6 years until those pieces of timber are getting like mashed down enough for them to kind of funnel their way through it, or the branches are broken up enough that there's enough room to kind of make their way through that cut or bed in the cut a little easier. The go-to cut that I like is either like a select cut where they're taking out maybe every 22 to 24 inch tree and leaving, seed trees. They used to do, I found like they used to do a style where they would just leave an island of trees. And I think that was a little less productive because the seeds had to travel further, via the air or, acorns falling or whatever. So it was better to do select cuts where they're leaving, sporadic trees all over the place. They used to have to plant something in those, and most of the time it was like mixed grasses or switchgrass. And you're kind of finding that after, there's maybe three cuts that I know of that are pretty productive that way. They've planted all these grasses and they've stayed that way, and they're 15, 20 years old, and it looks like they're a 5-year-old cut. Sometimes when you're talking about the age of cut, you can look at it and be like, oh, this cut's 5 years old, but you really don't know that unless you look back at a map, because they're just kind of all over the place in the way they've changed how they do cuts or whatever the latest research is on how to do them. As far as hunting them goes, they are 100% worth walking through the very middle of a cut and looking at everything you can inside it. Because I have found small ditches or creeks in the middle of a cut that when that cut is 6-7 years old and it's hard to get into, if you know that logging path that gets you in there pretty easy, man, you might find like the room I'm sitting in is 10 by 14. You might find a little 10 by 14 spot that you get a 5-yard shot in. If that's the area the deer are going through, like, go hunt it. The first buck that I killed, I told you I didn't use any cameras. This wasn't the first buck I killed. It was the first buck that I killed with my bow, and it was my first deer on public. I found this spot. I was like, I am hunting this spot at some point in time next year.
Only Murders in the Building, Season 5.
The hit Hulu original is back.
The night Lester died, he was talking with this mobster.
Was he killed in a hit?
We need to go face to face with the mob. Get ready for a season.
Buongiorno, signore.
Oh, this is how I die.
You can't refuse.
You're going to save the day, like you always do, by being smart, sharp, and almost always by mistake.
The Hulu original series, Only Murders in the Building, premieres September 9th. Streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply. New episodes Tuesdays.
From dawn to dusk and every moment in between, Captain Justin Leake and Meredith McCord have an exciting adventure waiting in the water. Catch Chasing the Sun, Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.
And I'm like, because of everything we talked about in the beginning, my dad taught me this about deer. My uncle taught me this about deer. These are the things that I've learned about deer on my own. These are the things I've learned about mature bucks from Dan Infalt, whatever it happened to be. And I said, well, it would make sense that I'm going to hunt this morning where yesterday it was 75 degrees and the high today is going to be 55. So my morning temp is 10 degrees colder than it was yesterday. The deer have some winter coats on, so 55 degrees is pretty hot. It's October 22nd. And there's a water hole here. And I'm inside a clear cut. I can only shoot I had one shot that was 15 yards. Okay. And I could tell there were a lot of different things using this water hole or whatever. and I had a bear come in early in the morning and almost climb my tree. I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to see any deer today. Like that, there's no chance. And at like 8:30, I heard a grunt and grunted this deer down a hill, and he was sitting there behind this laurel bush for like 45 minutes, just scratching his back with his antlers and chewing his cud until he came out. He was only 15 yards away, and I couldn't shoot him because he was behind all this stuff. And he came out to 12, and I made a good shot on him, and he went like 40 yards. And the thing about that spot is, like, you know, as a bow hunter, you want to be able to see everything. Like, you want to get up and like, you know, kind of not like a rifle hunter where you're like trying to shoot something at 500 yards, but bow hunters like to see, like, you know, you're interested in the woods. I want to see what's happening. That's important because it's kind of what keeps us, you know, I want to see deer when I'm out hunting. Like, it's fun to see deer, you know, and get a little excited. But sometimes the important thing is just to get where they are, because you want that deer to be where you can kill it. Like, I want to be in the spot where, like, okay, if I only see 2 or 3 deer in here, hey, well, this 2 or 3 deer, I could have maybe seen 20, but I have 0% chance to shoot them and about 99% chance to have an opportunity at this one because it's already in my wheelhouse when I can see it. And it's where they want to live because they feel real comfortable there. And I don't think I would have killed that buck had I been in the wide open. You know, he's kind of wily, you know. He was even squirrely when he came out to that 12 yards. He was like, oh, I don't know, I'm about in this area where I have 10 extra feet around me, you know. So it's one of those things where I like hunting inside a clear cut pretty often. For that kind of thing. Like, hey, you got a runway where deer are going to go through and it's obvious they're going through it. You got a little something like that water with a couple acorns over it. Hey, that deer stopped there because it was almost 55 degrees and he was hot, you know. Those are things you kind of got to think about when you're coming to clear cuts. But there's a lot of other things. They live in there in the summertime. You can look at the tire ruts in a clear cut and you'll see a little bit of water laying in there. Put your hand in there. It's cold. You know, even in the middle of the summer, that water is pretty cold. Deer can I've kicked up does and fawns laying in that stuff. There's obviously plenty of food. Those are the things that I really like about clear cuts. But a lot of times, if you can find that microscopic terrain inside a cut that may be made by tire ruts or pulling logs up a hill, and it's a foot difference, sometimes that makes the difference, and you probably have something around that you could shoot out of. Either it's kind of hard to hunt from the ground in a cut, depending on how high that browse is. But as far as your main question goes, what age kind of are you focusing on? It really depends on the cut and what it looks like. Because like I've said, one of the couple of the ones I know about are 20 years old, and somebody would go there and say they're 5 to 7 years old. I hunt cuts that are brand new that look like they're 20 years old after 2 or 3 years, just because they just, you know, they're right in the sun and they just shoot stuff up right away. So that all kind of depends, but it's really what I can get into and what I can find in the cut that matter the most.
And so when you're scouting cuts, do you start, I know you said you just walk right down through the center of it, but are you starting like on the edges? Do you like cuts that are like up against a swamp or that have other things? I mean, what makes one better than the other?
The buck that I killed, that buck in over the water hole that I just told you about, and I don't hunt that cut anymore. So if you want to have it, like whoever, like go ahead, because it's going to be pretty obvious when you find it. That one kind of butted up against a maybe a bowl, you know, kind of a bowl in terrain. It was a ridge. It's kind of like a ridge top type. Most of the cuts here are on ridge. They're most of the time the cuts are towards the top. They're not doing a lot of cuts down in the bottoms. Most of the bottoms are kind of pine type stuff, and they're not really making clear cuts in pines. But the way that cut worked that was pretty unique was it was done in, I think it's, let's say it's 300 to 500 acres. It's something like that. It was done in 4 different time frames. Like they did one part, 2 years later they did another part, 2 years later did another part, 2 years later did another part. It made 4 edges because of that. So you have this one edge that's, now a 2-year-old cut, and when they cut this one, by the time it gets this height, so you have a 4-year-old cut and a 2-year-old cut. Really good age classes. You have different types of brows in each because of the age class they are. And the more they did, the more that pattern repeated. So you could kind of just get in on the edges of these 4 different cuts, and you had all this different food. And because they were soft edges, they were almost, they weren't almost, they were directly funnels, just those straight edges of those cuts. Something kind of cool. And you would kind of learn this pretty quick, like, hey, these deer are really preferring to bed in this shorter cut, and they're eating on this bigger cut because that browse is hanging straight over that edge there, and you could see it. Like, you ever see, Uncle Pete's arborvitae, like they're cut to this, there's a browse line on them. Same thing on those clear cuts, So that's something you kind of look for, is if you have years where cuts are kind of done consecutively. If you don't have that, you can look at whatever, wherever you can meet where there's like a couple different, as many edges as you can get. So if I have a hardwoods ridge that hits the edge of a clear cut, and the end of that ridge is like pines, somewhere in between those 3 things, you're probably going to find the most deer sign, or something that's like a hub or whatever. A lot of times you'll find on those, especially like we'll call it a trifold area, you'll find like a double scrape or something that is a good area. You'll find exit and entry trails leading in and out of that cut. Those are good areas too. So that type of thing is what I'm looking for the most, is like where the edge of that cut meets another cut, meets a hardwoods ridge. That's where I like to hunt them the most.
And is that like your go-to? Is that where you focus most of your time?
So clear cuts are, when I started hunting clear cuts, I'd like look on X and be like, look at this area. They cut this whole thing. There's not going to be any deer in there anymore. They cut the whole woods down. Well, you learn pretty quick. Like, obviously that's where all the food is, and that's one reason they do them. And that was kind of that was something I did not know from hunting private land for so long. I did not know a single thing about a clear cut. And I found it, I was like, well, I don't know. There's no woods here. Like, there's probably no deer. Well, then I just remember, I'm going to look online, like how to hunt a clear cut. I was like, oh yeah, there's lots of deer in clear cuts. And there wasn't very many articles back then. It was like, I could find 4, you know what I mean? And, as it got along, it's like, oh, clear cuts are a good thing. And there really wasn't many clear cuts then either. There was, 3 or 4 of them to hunt on the pieces that I can hunt. And, after a while, you're just kind of like, well, I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to look around. And then you start finding the stuff you're supposed to find, and like, hey, putting the pieces together. But that is one thing that you kind of just learn over time, I think.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, I think I'm where you started with clear cuts, is that they're around, and ours are, the ones that I see are 4 or 5 years old, and it's like waist high oak scrub and other crap, and then there's just big trees in the center of them, like, even like trees that are like too big to climb, that are left. And it's just like, well, I have no idea. I mean, I'm sure there's deer in there. It's thick and nasty, and and I've walked through some of them, walked some of the logging roads, found some sign, but it's like I have no idea where to.
Well, you asked, I didn't directly answer your question. You asked, is that always where I start, and is that what I really focus on? So sometimes hunting a clear cut is not, you already know that the clear cut is deer heaven, deer food heaven, right? There's lots and lots and lots of food in a clear cut. Like, at one point I wrote an article about clear cuts for, I think I have one on Meat Eater, but I wrote one, I've written like lots of them because everybody wants to talk about clear cuts. I looked it up somewhere where like the percentage, like the amount of food per square acre a clear cut provides versus a hardwoods timber. And it is astronomical, the amount of food a clear cut has. And sometimes deer don't always use a clear cut to live in. It might depend on the size, whatever. So the things that I'm focusing on are, okay, are the deer living in here or are they not? Sometimes a camera can tell you that, sometimes it can't. Most of the time it's hunting in person. If it's a clear cut that I think is not like, okay, the deer are all coming here for food, but they're not really using the cut, I'm going to track that back to wherever they're using. So I'm going to like follow trails and tracks and poop, like all your typical deer sign, back to an area where I think a deer might want to bed or live. Or if I get to a spot and it's like, hey, it looks like deer are using this oak ridge as a staging area and using the clear cut as their primary food source, just like a deer would use an alfalfa field for a primary food source and hit acorns or whatever before they go out to that. That's something I've done. If I can get into a clear cut, a lot of times first I'm focusing on like, how far can I get into this cut without killing myself? So I'm taking old logging tracks down and then kind of following those little vein chutes that go off of them to the right or left. And do I get to the end of this and is there something I can use as a shooting lane, or can I get in a tree close by that I can shoot 10, 15 yards? And then, hey, is there actually sign that they're going through this little chute that I have to hunt? And can I get into it in the dark without blowing everything out? Like, that's important. If you don't have, we talk about it all the time, it's cliche, but if you don't, if you're going to go in there and blow everything out, it might not be worth hunting until later on, where when you blow things out, they're probably coming back. You hunt during the rut, that might be a thing. When I first started hunting clear cuts, I hunted on. So do you ever read that book, Mapping Trophy Whitetails by Brad Herndon? So it's a great book. If you're kind of just learning the terrain stuff, it's good. So he talks a lot about cuts in there, and he talks about like, I don't know what he calls it, but basically there's always going to be a trail that goes around the entire outside of a cut that deer are using to kind of traverse around it. And then you have these, like I said, entry and exit trails. If you can follow one of those entry and exit trails through a cut, and a lot of times you have so much little browse that it's pretty easy to follow those trails. If you can follow one of those to where it crosses an old logging track in the middle of that cut, or it crosses two of those tracks, hey, what's in between these two little tracks? Is there a little water, or is there something else that attracts them to just this spot that I can actually hone in and kill? Are they going to pause here for a second where I can kill them? Steve Bartilla's book is pretty good he talks a little bit about clear cuts and how you can get pretty close, in that he's big on the, hey, does this scrape pause them for a minute for me to make a shot? Or is it a place that they kind of hang out for a while before it gets dark or be, that kind of thing. So those are important things that I'm looking for when I'm in a cut, is, following those, intricacies. And then really, again, Brad Herndon's book really helps you to learn about deer funnels. And even if he's not talking about a clear cut per se, you can kind of learn the general idea of how a deer might use a clear cut as a funnel. Again, if they're not using the clear cut to live in and that kind of thing, you might want to think about, is there a series of cuts where there's a strip of timber left between the cuts? That's kind of an area where you're going to get a lot of hunting pressure now, because people, know about clear cuts, and they're very interested in hunting clear cuts, and it's a pretty obvious spot on where you should sit with a clear cut, because if you walk between one of those strips of timber that runs between a clear cut, there is a lot of deer sign there. Especially if it's like a new cut where it's completely down and there's no cover, or you have something where they laid a bunch of stuff down and they can't get through it yet, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I just, I know a lot of people hunt them. I know all that stuff. And then I go back to, like, it's a clear cut. Is it like a gun hunter thing? Is it like a rifle thing where if you can just get up and, like you said, you can see a long ways, and just to be able to shoot down into there.
Yeah, sometimes.
But I'm just saying, like, when you were saying like rifle hunters versus bow hunters, like wanting to see, I think you could survey a bigger area. But yeah, I mean, and there's different types, because like I said, there's the one that I'm thinking of specifically that I was over by today is, 4 or 5 foot high oak scrub. And then there's another place that I park that's probably like one of those 10 to 15-year-old clear cuts, and it's all like that incredibly dense popple whips.
Yeah.
That is like, it seems impenetrable.
Yeah.
And then you go around the edges of it, and it seems like every one of those popples at some point over the last X amount of years has been rubbed up, and you're like, they obviously like this, but when are they doing it, etc. So,
yeah. Well, and like I said, you can think of it as at some point in that clear cut's life, deer really, really, really like to eat out of it and get food out of it. It might not mean it's a huntable place. But then you kind of think of it as like the center of attention, and then you have to go around it and kind of figure out, okay, well, how are the deer? I mean, the deer might be willing to travel a mile to get to that clear cut. Same thing is like if you have ag a mile or two away from you, it's not really very hard for a deer to walk a mile or two. It gets dark at, whatever time in it right now, 8 o'clock at night. Oh, they can get that clear cut by 9 easily. And they come back here stinking 2 a.m. No problem. They were out there hours feeding, So it's not really a big thing for a deer to walk that far. So you might have to use that clear cut. For pressure reasons, like people really like to hunt clear cuts now, especially if there's not a lot of ag around. They know that's where the food is. It's pretty obvious. So sometimes clear cuts get too much pressure to be able to actually hunt the clear cut. And you just kind of have to you kind of have to use your woodsmanship skills and find, what's around that cut. And it might be a mile away. But it could still potentially, has a really high potential from that kind of a distance to be used as a main food source.
So when do you start hunting? Like, when does the PA season start?
So we have a couple of special regs areas. I'm not very far from one. So I will start hunting next Saturday. I picked up permission on a farm. A friend at work, she has a little hobby she's a nurse practitioner. Her and her husband have a little hobby farm, and actually it's not little anymore. They farm like 300 acres, and I can hunt about 100 of it. They're having a lot of crop damage issues. So she's like, can you please come and kill some deer? So we also learned that there's a load of coyotes and a lot of raccoons. So we get to do some predator hunting there, because she's got a little pasture. She's going to have, sheep and goats and stuff, and she doesn't want all that around. So we're going to be doing that next weekend. Be kind of fun to knock some of the cobwebs off and hopefully kill some does early, get a couple tags filled. And then statewide opens October 4th in Pennsylvania. So that's when I'll be hunting my favorite areas.
And like for you, what's the, you got, let's say that, all the stars align, your daughter becomes this crazy volleyball star. You got volleyball from now until eternity. What's the one day that you're going to be in the woods?
October 29th.
Okay.
Maybe not. It might be somewhere between the 25th and the 30th of October. That's my favorite time.
And what are you hunting at that time? Like,
I really prefer the downwind edges of doe bedding on some kind of a scrape line. I'm a scrape guy. I like hunting scrapes a lot.
It seems like from everything that you just outlined, from like, this and that, all this historical data and blah, 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 like you just brought it back to like the most rudimentary, like what I always fall back on.
Scrapes.
You know, like just downwind of doe bedding, there's gonna be bucks there.
Okay. I end up hunting all those areas, but at that time, so the buck that I talked about over the waterhole was October 22nd. I killed a buck on a terrain funnel that came out of a clear cut. Without giving too much information away, it was not ultimately very close to the clear cut, but it was definitely terrain funnel that came out of the cut. I killed that deer October 28th. I killed another buck on the edge of a clear cut using a scrape line that came out of a clear cut on the 26th of October. The buck that I hit a couple years ago was November 1st, so pretty close to those dates. So they all kind of end up being in the same area. Typically when I get closer to the rut, I'm looking that end of October, I'm kind of looking for where does are always going to use those clear cuts. So I'm really hey, where are the areas that the does are using the clear cuts that the bucks are going to try to check the does when they're done doing their thing in the morning? Because that last week of October, it's not, sometimes you have a little bit of aggressive chasing, not usually though. It's usually pretty casual, going through scent check. If there's something happening, maybe I'll check it out. But they're not they're on still pretty high alert. Like if you make a wrong move at that time of year, they're like, boop. It's not like the rut where they're kind of walking through like they're drunk, So that's kind of something that I'm looking at is like, hey, where they kind of just, what's kind of just taking the temperature of what's happening in the woods. That's kind of the area I want to be.
I can agree with that. I don't know. Like I said, world's worst bow hunter here, so I'm just trying to get all the information that I possibly can. But hopefully we'll be able to have you back on here, say, November 5th through the 10th, and you're telling us the story about, your biggest buck ever coming out of one of these clear cuts.
I hope so. That would be a lot of fun. But dude, I'm available for you anytime, my friend.
Well, I do appreciate you coming on here. And so with the In-Camp podcast, once again, tell people where they can find it and kind of what to expect from you going forward.
Cool. So it's in-camp_podcast. You can find it on Apple and Spotify. I think it's on iHeartRadio too. The podcasts do get uploaded to YouTube. I'm not really a big YouTube guy yet, so occasionally maybe you'll find a video on there, but probably not. Most of the videos do get uploaded via Spotify too. So you can find me there. You can find me. My regular Instagram handle is Aaron_Hepler. And all the links for writing and that kind of thing are available on my link tree. If you want to see any of the articles or anything like that, they're available there. Some good stuff at Truth from the Stand. Clint still gets some hits on the stuff I wrote for him back in the day. Some stuff from Meat Eater, some stuff coming out with East Meets West Hunt with Bo Martonic. So you guys can check that out. But yeah, expectations from In-Camp Podcast, you can expect it all from me, I hope. And if there's things that people want to hear, I want to hear about it. So again, it's going to be all hunting, fishing, bird dog. I'm hoping this spring. My brother and his buddies are kind of adventure nuts, so they do a lot of through hikes and cave diving and all that kind of stuff. I probably won't talk a whole lot about that, but I'd like to touch on some of that stuff too, because I love it all. My family loves to camp, so probably stuff on that too coming down the pike.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Anytime, man.
Hit the road for fun and heartwarming fishing adventures with the Real American Road Trip.
I just want to hook up one time. I just need to hook up one time.
Catch the Waypoint Original Series every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on the Waypoint TV channel. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.
I did get a bite. I have gotten a bite. I did feel it.